we are joined from Cairo by Mr. Ashraf Abu Al-Houl, the managing editor of Al-Ahram newspaper, and Dr. Hamid Faris, an international relations expert. Welcome to you both. Well, we'll start with you, Mr. Abu Al-Houl. Why do you think the Syrian front has flared up at this particular moment?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes. Why do you think that the Syrian front has flared up at this particular moment?
Certainly that the Syrian front is totally linked to the Lebanese front as well as the Palestinian front to prove the evidence that the second day of the ceasefire in Lebanon, the Syrian front has fired up, and that there is another evidence of the close linkage between the two fronts, which is the main objectives mainly are the Iranian militias affiliated in Iran, in Syria, where has a great influence, and Syria had used it in the long-range civil war, and therefore, and it seems that someone wanted to make this militant busy with a new conflict in order to avoid interference in the Lebanese dossier, and also as a part of the military operations against Hezbollah, as it still has factors in Syria and the north of Syria. But the strange thing is that these militias that mobilized against the Syrian state and against these militias are belonging to the old Al-Qaeda organization that has another name of Jabhat al-Nusra, and now is named as Tahrir Sham, or Liberation Syria, that has a religious reference. And although they are allied with Western forces in order to complete Israel's objectives under the pretext of establishing an Islamic state in Syria and in the whole region.
And coming to you, Mr. Faris, what do you make of the unexpected success of the armed factions in Aleppo and in other key areas?
Greetings to you and to the viewers of Qnews. And I think that the terrorism isn't going to prevail, as that this is a systematic from internal powers supported to execute a special agenda in the Syrian front. No matter the length of the operations by the armed factions, and I think that the Syrian and army, as well as the Syrian state, are going to be controlled, but will take more time, as the armed militants have succeeded to control around 100 kilometers within the Syrian territories, which is a great spaces that require more to work. In addition, that there are strategic allies of the Syrian state, on top of which the Russian state and some other regional powers, as we witness within the Syrian situations, by establishing a real reality which is imposed in the militants their words upon the state. Therefore, the the international community should move in supporting the Syrian state, and that became they are winners and losers. With respect to the winners, the first one will be the United States of America, as pressuring Russia in the Middle East, in particular in the Syrian dossier, and the other part, Turkey, that wish to have a normalization with the Syrian part under their provisions. And the withdrawal in the northwestern of Syria, in addition to Israel, that is interested to keep the flamed situations in the area in the Middle East, as there are several powers of the Hezbollah. And the second point, they are losers. The first will be the Syrian state, as there is a great violations to Syria by these factions. And Russia, that their interests are threatened by different parties, and Hezbollah, that they are targeted in the north and western of Syria.
And coming back to you, Mr. Abu al-Hul, every armed group requires funding and also logistical support. Who do you think is behind supporting these groups, and why?
Certainly, they are a great power that assists in training and arming these factions. It's enough to say that it's been discovered that such factions has a unit of drones, of several drones to be used in confrontation, and they are fully vested and trained. And it's said that military experts from Eastern Europe were training these factions. Where the funding comes from, it may came from or through Israel or the United States, and surely this funding came from some part. Some would say it is a self-funding, and I don't think it is a real thing, because the al-Nusra movement previously had been affected to great hits, and their resources were demolished a lot. And I think that in the midst of the civil war in Syria, they were trading in everything, in drugs, architectures, and they do anything they can to bring money. These issues, these things or matters were stopped, and their things were demolished. And if they are moving by these features of power and army, then that should be, there is a great power made training for them and give them what is enough to launch a war of that shape. It wasn't waged against a village or city, but in great vast areas of the Syrian territories, and some of the important governorates in areas such as Aleppo, Idlib, and Hama, that they are very vast areas. And they're saying that these managed to dominate great quantities of Iranian arms in the arms of Hezbollah and the Syrian army. But when this what happened following the first 2 days of launching. But where did they bring the armies, and who pulled these armies for them? This is a question that needs to be addressed and to know the answer. But logics would say that there is a power that helped them, trained them, and maybe in a way or another, Turkey had participated for sentiment to the Syrian government, and otherwise they are, or there is great powers in the area and in the world that finance these factions and train them.
And Mr. Faris, these recent clashes in Aleppo mark a significant shift in the situation in Syria. How do you view the escalation, and does it compare to the confrontations that have taken place in the past?
of course, it differs from the past, considering what happened before. There was a real resistance by the Syrian army. As a result, several were fell down from the Syrian army. But now the militant factions and extremists are pursuing to execute on the greatest plan, as there is no potential to cover this area, and I think that is vanished by factions to control Aleppo and hidden to Hama, and it is possible to find them entering new areas. But in the meantime, the lack of retaliations by the Syrian army would raise too many questions to reconsider the situation accurately, and to target these factions and to target in their strongholds, as there isn't a great surprise exposed by the Syrian state, as this confrontation, despite it was prepared well, supported by regional and international powers, but this type of support would largely affect the corners of the Syrian state that the militant faction succeeded to controlling. But in all cases, we should realize that there's a great dangerous not only on the Syrian territories, but there is a great threat to the national security of the Arab as they have been developed training. There are meetings by the intelligence and the chief and the factions as a result of a great serious arrangement are prepared for the region, particularly that the war criminal Netanyahu, by saying, as quoted, that threatened the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. And the second point, why we're seeing a great team of Ukrainian intelligence team to meet these factions and to coordinate between them to gain an advanced arms. As a result, that there is are targeting the Syrian state and the threat of the Russian part as the United States of America, that they're trying to end the war in Russia. So we are facing a very complicated landscape, never been seen in Syria before, and we are about to go back to the point, the first corner. Therefore, I think it is necessary for the international community, as there are very clear violations for the Syrian state, and the Syrian army should be bolstered in reality, that things would lead to disable the situation in Syria and the integrity of the Syrian territories.
Now, Mr. Abu al-Hul, some analysts explain this escalation as an attempt to cut off support for Hezbollah that's passing through Syria. What do you make of that explanation? And do you believe it is an Israeli move?
I think that this vast movement just to keep Hezbollah and to hinder the support of Hezbollah in Lebanon, as there are some factors in Syria and they are participating in disabling the Syrian state in a way or another. During the Israeli aggression against Lebanon, there were attempts and messages to convey to Bashar al-Assad to stop supporting Hezbollah and stopping the entrance of the Iranian arms through their countries. And I think there were some intelligence and information that the force battalion in the Syrian part led by Bashar al-Assad, that they were attacked, and they think that they are participating in trafficking their arms, and their areas affiliated to Hezbollah, around 4,000 kilometers were hit in order to be moved through Lebanon, and there were attempts to convince Russia to stop trafficking the arms from Syria to Lebanon through the controlled area. But it seems when Israel failed to prevent these arms to Hezbollah through Syria, has decided to flame the area in Syria. But I think that the United States intervention in a way or another will prevent Israel to show up again in this point, and Israeli support will continue to these factions that they are having the umbrella of the Comprehensive Liberation Front, and that will be very effective through provide them with intelligence training and the most advanced arms. So without the emergence of Israeli factors in this conflict, and there are some information that more than 25,000 of the Iranian militant that are Iraqi affiliated to Iran try to enter Syrian territories in supporting the Syrian army and Hezbollah. And the Iranian forces, they are attempting to prevent this, but these information aren't confirmed yet. But there is an escalation in the area, but I don't think that Israel part nor the American part would emerge directly, especially that these factions that affiliate in liberating Al-Sham front, when they reached Aleppo and Idlib, and their vast dissemination focused in civilian areas, so that would prevent the attack, and therefore that will lead to attrition war without the participation of Israel. But ultimately, there will be some sort of compromise to end this war, in return the evacuation of Iran from Syria.
And Mr. Faris, what are the long-term implications of this? Do you think there's any chance at all, any possibility that the armed factions might be able to establish some kinds of de facto administration in Aleppo?
In all cases, this phase will come to an end as the extremism will be continued, and as well as the foreign interference will continue, as these factions they are on just arms to execute regional and international agenda, but in reality there will be good response by the Syrian army that would require more space and time, and get things under control once again. This is also relied on the size of support provided to the Syrian army. Is Russia is going to support the Syrian army in large? And they're going to be for Hezbollah to have a role in confronting or supporting these militants, as Russia are the main pillar of the Syrian army, is suffering a lot in Ukraine, as they are very much concerned following the approval of US in using some arms in Ukraine that reached 115 kilometers in depth of Russia. This would lead only one thing: are they going to have a compromises between the big powers that they cannot be separated, that having the elected president in the area, and if they wish to have a solution for the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, should also find a solution to the conflicts in the Middle East, as they are in a great linkage between the international power and the imbalanced situation in the region, as the Middle East area is being transferred to in an area of international conflict. But I think that the militant factions won't be able to continue. They are very advanced, in fact, in Aleppo, but this won't gain any military stability, as these factions will be confronted either from the Syrian army or their affiliations, and I'm talking about the Hezbollah and as well as the Russian side.
Okay, and thank you very much to both of you for joining me here on the program. That was from Cairo, Dr. Hamed Faris, a professor of international relations, and also joining us, the managing editor of Al Ahram newspaper, Ashraf Abu El Hul. Thank you very much to both of you for joining me here on In Depth.